Okay. Then we ran it to the rubidium-strontium method. Ah, good. And it's 325 million, plus or minus 25 million. But to then do a fourth test, they did the rubidium-strontium isochron method, and it came up with 375 million, plus or minus 25. Therefore, your rock is between 98 million and 520 million years old. I said, how can you know which test is right then? He said, did you find any fossils near it? I didn't want to tell him, but I said, yeah, I found a fossilized clam. He said, did you take it to a biologist? I said, yes. He says it's an index fossil that's 320 million years old. And he goes, well then, rubidium-strontium got the dates right. That's how it's done. There are no radioisotope labs in the world that will give you a date unless you also tell them as you send in the sample what date you are looking for. That's not science. That's just not, friends. But it's true. And it is so sad. Again, fossils date the rocks, and the radiometric dating is there to support whatever the biologist says. But wait a minute. How about these presuppositions? People will say, no, wait, we see it, we measure it, we extrapolate from the results, that's science. Sounds right, but it isn't. What if Glenn, I've known Glenn for a few years, what if Glenn were sitting up here in a chair while I'm talking, peeling potatoes? Work with me here. There aren't a lot of laughs tonight, so you're going to have to get them where you can. Over here, there is a basket of unpeeled potatoes, and over here, there is a basket of peeled potatoes. And you're watching him do that because you're not very interested in tonight's topic. And as you're watching him, you're wondering, I wonder how long he's been up there peeling potatoes. And so you get your watch ready and you mark. And you notice that it takes him 60 seconds to peel a potato. And you've watched him several times and it's taken him 60 seconds to peel the potato. So you get up, since the rest of people are so bored they're in a stupor and won't notice. You come up, you look in the basket, you count 20 potatoes, and you say, he's been doing this for 20 minutes. There are a lot of people who would say, that's science. No, it isn't. There are a lot of problems with it. Number one, you are assuming the rate of potato peeling has remained constant, even though you only saw a little. What if he was better at it, faster at it, but he's getting tired now? Or what if he wasn't very good at it and he's speeding up now? He's had practice. You also don't know how many potatoes were in that basket peeled before he started. You assumed he's the one who started it. You also don't know if that at some time during the peeling process somebody did not come and remove some of the peeled potatoes, throwing off your count. On and on and on, the assumptions are bad. By the way, this is why you should never get your science from newspapers and magazines. Because people who don't know science would have heard the potato story and said, yes, that makes sense. It doesn't. And I don't know, there are only a certain amount of news I can watch on TV. Because right now, for example, you'll hear people saying, we should have strengthened the doors on airplanes long ago. That would have stopped this. No, it wouldn't have. Now it would. But before, all you'd have to do is start killing passengers, they would have opened the door. And yet, every day, you're hearing the experts almost every hour saying, we have to strengthen those doors. That should have been done years ago. It wouldn't have mattered before September the 11th. And yet, people aren't used to thinking critically. They're not used to thinking logically. And therefore, they get upset. I find it interesting that today, the president, who I think is a nice guy, said it's too dangerous for pilots to have pistols, and then gave the military permission to shoot them down. There's a flaw in there, and I'm going to find it. But presuppositions are frightening things, people. Remember the assumptions. They're saying this rock had to be in a closed system, which means nothing in the system could have come in after it was made. Nothing goes out. This is a closed system, uranium to lead. And that it initially was all uranium. That's another assumption. And that the rate has been constant. However, remember this, if any of those assumptions are wrong, then the date is completely invalid. And now know this, every single one of the assumptions is provably wrong. Number one, there is no such thing in nature as a closed system. Everything in nature impacts something and is impacted by something. Period. There are no exceptions. Number two, it is impossible to ever know the initial components of a system that was laid down without a witness. So you can't know that rock started off all uranium. It is impossible. And the third one, they really don't like you to know, but you need to know. No process rate is unchangeable. Even the speed of light is getting measurably slower. I don't know how they measure it. I have read books on how they measure it, but I'm not smart enough to get all the math on that one. But as they discuss it and argue about how slow it's getting and how fast it's getting slow, I'm thinking, no rate is constant in the universe. None. And that's an amazing thing to say, but it is still very true. That's why rates can be a good statistical average, but you cannot be deterministic with it. You can't run it back to the beginning of time and say, all right, 60 million years. Plus, there's another thing which has not been factored in. When God made the world, He made it so that you and I could live on it. Therefore, it had to be a grown-up world. So let me ask a question. How old was Adam 2 minutes after God made him? That's not an easy question. You might want to say 2 minutes. However, he was full-grown in his mental, physical, sexual prime. So about my age. No. Long past that one. Not only am I over the hill, I'm thinking the tunnel looks nice and shady. No, not me. But he would have been a full-grown man. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is a very important question. The Bible answers it. A chicken with an egg in it. The Bible says everything was made full-grown with its fruit in it, ready to bear its fruit. When God made an apple tree, it didn't have blossoms. It had apples on it. It was ready to go. It looked full-grown. If you would have cut it down, it would have had rings. But there were no years. I find that something which people need to remember. He made the earth full-grown too, so that it would supply our needs, so that we could harness it, so that we could work with it. So how old is the universe is not the same as how old does it look. There's a big difference. It is very well balanced. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but in our universe, there is a fairly constant number of thunderstorms going at any one moment. There's a reason for that. Thunderstorms, are you aware of this? Lightning does not actually come from the clouds down. It's actually heading back up. Most people don't know that. If you're struck by it, you don't care. But that is what's happening. It is a trick of the eyes and the light that makes us think otherwise. With that said, scientists tell you that if we did not have exactly that number blossoming and going off at the same time, static electricity would have killed us all. Our systems would have gone out of balance. Everything's in balance. Why do we have deserts? If you don't have deserts, you can't have rain. Because around every rain droplet, it must coalesce around a bit of sand, dust, dirt. It must coalesce around something. Deserts are the raw material for our rain. We need them both. There is a balance there. Very interesting stuff, friends. We can keep going on rocks. I'm going to try to do this very briefly because I know that rocks can make some people incredibly bored. And no, don't need to raise your hands or point. Uranium elements always exist. Uranium is never found in a baggie somewhere. It's stuck around other rocks where rain and wind erodes them back and forth. Therefore, we don't know what the rock looked like when it first started. Plus, we have found something. If you reverse the magnetic field around a uranium sample, the rate changes. We now know it's demonstrably true that Earth's magnetic field has reversed several times. What has that done to the rate in the process? That's something which a lot of people are arguing about right now. In fact, when lava cools, there's uranium in most lava. Don't know if you know that. But when lava cools and you get the uranium out, it already has lead in it. When it is formed, it has the daughter element in it. It didn't start off pure. That's important to remember. Since igneous rocks where the ages are known, we find that radiometrics doesn't give us the right answer. Why should we trust them when we don't know the ages? If your witness is false every time you can catch him in a lie, why would you believe him the other times? I think it's an important question to ask. Same problems occur with potassium-argon dating because they're calibrated by the uranium-lead method. It's the same problem. In fact, there were rocks that were formed in 1801 in Hawaii by a volcanic explosion. There were lots of witnesses. They wrote it down. We know when the explosion occurred. They went in there just a few years ago and cut out some of those to teach their students how to use radioisotope dating on these rocks. They did not get an age of 200 years. They got varying dates from between 160 million to 3 billion years. And rocks we knew were 200 years old. Do not be afraid. When someone says, this is billions of years old, just smile, and if you don't remember any of these facts or figures, say, were you there? Do you know? I've got a witness. I have a witness who wrote a book. He was there. He knows. You know, the only real evidence for a long history of the earth is that it's necessary to support evolution. There is no science evidence for it. None. Remember this. We can look back and find no records before 6,000 years. I'm asked about, what about these things that weren't really apes and weren't really humans? So far, we haven't found one. Every time we think we have, within 10 years, it's shoved off in one column or the other. Right now, as of 2001, there are no fossils that we call subhuman. Neanderthal has now been elevated to completely human, able to breed with humans, and able to produce art, society, agriculture, but they look different. There is a huge racist component to evolution. It was thought up by a bunch of nice English upper-class white guys. And guess what? They thought the pinnacle of evolution was being a nice English upper-class guy who's white. And if you didn't look like them, it was proof that you had not evolved as far as them. And that, my friend, is evolution's dirty secret. And so any skull that doesn't look like a nice English white guy is considered to be primitive. However, Neanderthal had a bigger brain than we did. Maybe his skull shape wasn't English, but he did all right. People say, well, where is he? He's in us. They're finding his DNA in us. He didn't go away. He interbred. That's the way things happen. And you can only breed with something which is your species. Now, there are some exceptions. For example, a horse can breed with a donkey. A lion can be bred with a tiger. It's not fun, but it can be done. There are some crossbreeds, but every crossbreed, the children of every crossbreed are sterile and cannot reproduce. Every one. You have to stay within your species. Yeah, in fact, the crossbreed of lion and tiger is called a liger. And you can sometimes see them in a zoo, but they will never have babies. If you decided to get 2 mules and start breeding them to get a lot of mules, mules can't reproduce. They're a crossbreed. It's rather like a seedless grape. What are you going to plant? There are no seeds. This is a real issue that we need to remember. And in fact, when we do know something, it doesn't fit with an old Earth. For example, we have 2 little helium. When uranium becomes lead, it produces helium. If you want to know how, we can talk later. But for most people, it's mind-numbingly boring, and they don't care anyway. Helium is just a way to talk funny at a party. And if you're trying to suck on a uranium rock to get it, it's going to take too long. So don't try. You never know who you're talking to. However, when we measure the amount of helium in the atmosphere, we don't have enough helium to account for all the years that we were supposed to have been here. Some scientists say, well, we can only account for about 7,000 years worth of helium, and that's correct, but we think helium is escaping into the outer atmosphere. That's what's happening. But that has now been reversed, and they're right now scrambling because we found helium comes in, it doesn't go out. 7,000 years of helium's all we got. Where'd the rest of it go? Where's it hiding? How about dust? Dust is always coming in our atmosphere, isn't it? It's coming in your atmosphere, I imagine. We buy stuff to even spray around and swift it and do everything else with it. Well, dust piles up. If you walk into a house and there's dust all over every place and you say, why don't you dust here? And they say, I just did. You know they didn't. Because there's a rate on it. By the way, you'd been terribly rude to bring it up. Or write your name on stuff. Don't do that. But the point is not manners here. The point is that's a clock. It shows you a rate, dust entering. With the dust entering our atmosphere on a 5 billion-year-old planet, we should have a 183 feet thick layer of dust. We don't. Except in some dorm rooms, we don't. Some people will say, no, because it's just eroded. That's a funny thing about dust. It has to erode to somewhere. It has to go somewhere. Where is it? Plus, cosmic dust is 2.5% nickel. Nickel's very rare in our atmosphere. If it had been coming in for 5 billion years, we would have 3,000% higher levels of nickel than we have now. But we don't. Where's the nickel? It settles. It doesn't blow away. Where is it? In fact, if we had a 5 billion-year-old planet, we would have 960 pounds of nickel on every square foot of ocean floor. I live by the ocean. It's not there. I peeked. It would annoy the sharks. In fact, if we use all the elements of sedimentation and the like, we come up with somewhere between 10,000 and 12,000 years is all we can account for. Every clock we know works does the same. The Earth's magnetic field is decaying.